When my boyfriend of 2 years introduced me as his friend at his company party, I smiled and played along. But when his boss started hitting on me right in front of him, I decided it was time his colleagues met the real me. What happened next changed everything. If you've ever been in a situation where someone you loved made you feel invisible, you'll understand exactly how this felt. Smash that like button if you're ready for some serious karma. And don't forget to subscribe because this story gets wild. My name is Sarah, and I thought I had everything figured out. At 28, I was thriving in my marketing career, living with the man I loved, and planning what I believed was our future together. Jake was everything I thought I wanted: ambitious, driven, and climbing the corporate ladder at his accounting firm. We'd been together for 2 years, and those early days felt like a fairy tale. I was his biggest cheerleader. When he worked late nights preparing for client presentations, I'd bring him dinner and sit quietly while he practiced his pitches. When he stressed about landing new accounts, I'd listen for hours as he strategized and planned. I genuinely believed we were a team building something beautiful together. But somewhere along the way something shifted. Jake became obsessed with his image at work. He started making comments about keeping his personal life separate from his professional world. First, I thought it was just work stress talking. Everyone handles pressure differently, right? But then he became secretive about work events, dodging my questions about office parties or company gatherings. I noticed he'd change the subject whenever I asked about his colleagues or mentioned wanting to meet them. When I suggested we host a dinner party for his work friends, he'd find excuses to postpone it indefinitely. The red flags were there, but I chose to trust him instead of my instincts. Then came the invitation to his company's annual party. It was their biggest event of the year, an elegant affair at a 5-star hotel where all the major clients and executives would be present. When Jake first mentioned it, I was excited. Finally, a chance to be part of his professional world, to meet the people he spent most of his time with. But Jake's reaction was strange. He hesitated, stumbled over his words, and eventually said he wasn't sure if bringing a +1 was appropriate. I felt confused and hurt, but I pushed those feelings down. Maybe he was just nervous about such an important event. Maybe he wanted to focus on networking without distractions. After days of awkward conversations and my growing disappointment, he finally agreed I could come. But then came the conditions. He sat me down and explained how I should act, what I should say, and who I should talk to. He made it sound like I was some kind of liability that needed to be managed rather than the woman he supposedly loved. I should have trusted my gut then. I should have asked the hard questions. But I was so desperate to support him and be part of his world that I agreed to everything. I told myself this was just one night, and afterward things would go back to normal. I had no idea how wrong I was. The night of the party arrived, and I spent hours getting ready. I chose my outfit carefully, elegant but not attention-grabbing, professional but still beautiful. I wanted to make Jake proud, to show his colleagues that he had excellent taste. I was genuinely excited to finally meet the people who were such a big part of his life. The venue was stunning. A grand ballroom with crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Important clients mingled with executives, and you could feel the weight of the business deals being discussed over champagne and appetizers. I felt nervous but confident, ready to charm everyone I met. But from the moment we walked in, Jake's behavior changed completely. The warm, affectionate man I lived with became cold and distant. He barely acknowledged me, positioning himself just far enough away that we didn't look like a couple. When colleagues approached us, he'd step slightly in front of me, as if he was trying to minimize my presence. Then came the first introduction, and my world tilted on its axis. "Oh, this is Sarah," Jake said casually to his coworker Mike. "She's a friend of mine." A friend. Not his girlfriend. Not his partner. Not even someone special. Just a friend. I felt like someone had slapped me across the face. My smile faltered for just a moment before I forced it back into place. Maybe I misheard. Maybe he was nervous and misspoke. But then it happened again with the next person we met. And again. And again. Each time the word friend hit me like a physical blow. I tried to correct it once, gently placing my hand on his arm and saying, "Actually, we're..." But Jake cut me off so quickly and smoothly that it left me speechless. The message was clear. I was to play along with his lie or cause a scene. I chose to play along, but inside I was crumbling. 2 years of love, of shared dreams, of building a life together. And I was just his friend, to the people who mattered most to him. I felt invisible, erased, like I didn't exist in any meaningful way in his life. Then Jake spotted his boss across the room, and I watched his entire demeanor change. He straightened his shoulders, fixed his tie, and that ambitious gleam appeared in his eyes. This was his moment to shine, to impress the man who controlled his career trajectory. "Sarah, I want you to meet my boss, Mr. Harrison," Jake said. His voice filled with the kind of respect and admiration I wished he'd show when talking about me. Mr. Harrison was everything you'd expect from a successful executive: tall, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, and radiating confidence. He was recently divorced, according to office gossip Jake had shared, and clearly comfortable in social situations. When Jake introduced me using that same crushing word, friend, I saw something shift in Harrison's expression. Interest. Immediate and obvious interest. "A friend," Harrison repeated, his eyes never leaving mine. "Well, aren't you lovely? I don't think I've seen you at any of our events before." I could feel Jake's discomfort radiating beside me, but he'd created this situation. He'd made his choice to deny our relationship, and now he had to live with the consequences. Harrison was charming in a way that Jake never quite managed. He asked about my work, complimented my dress, and made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt all evening. When he asked me to dance, I glanced at Jake, expecting him to object, to finally claim me as his girlfriend. Instead, he just stood there, trapped by his own lie. As Harrison led me to the dance floor, I could feel Jake's eyes burning into my back. This was his boss, the man who determined his promotions and bonuses, and he was helpless to do anything about the situation he'd created. For the first time all evening, I felt a spark of something other than hurt and humiliation. Harrison was an excellent dancer, and as we moved across the floor, he continued his charm offensive. He asked for my number, suggested we get dinner sometime, and made it clear that he found me attractive and interesting. All while Jake watched from the sidelines, unable to intervene without revealing his deception. "You know," Harrison said as the song ended, "I'd love to take you out to dinner this weekend. There's this amazing new restaurant downtown that I've been wanting to try." I looked over at Jake, who was pretending to be engaged in conversation with other colleagues but was clearly listening to every word. His face was pale, his jaw clenched, and I could practically see the panic in his eyes. That's when it hit me. This was my moment. Jake had made me invisible, had denied our relationship to protect his precious image. But what if I stopped being invisible? What if I made our relationship very, very visible? I'd love that. I heard myself say to Harrison, my voice steady and clear. "Dinner sounds perfect." The rest of the party passed in a blur of strategic conversations and careful planning. I accepted Harrison's dinner invitation with enthusiasm, gave him my number, and watched Jake's horror grow with each passing moment. But I maintained my composure, playing the role of the available single woman that Jake had cast me as. Jake couldn't say a word. He couldn't object to his boss asking out his friend, without revealing that he'd been lying to everyone. He'd painted himself into a corner, and I was about to show him exactly what that felt like. When we got home that night, Jake exploded. "What the hell was that?" he shouted. "You gave him your number. You accepted a date with my boss." I looked at him calmly, feeling more in control than I had in months. "I don't understand why you're upset," I said quietly. "I'm just your friend, remember? Friends are allowed to date other people." The look on his face was worth every moment of humiliation I'd endured that evening. But I wasn't done. Not even close. That weekend, I met Harrison for dinner at the upscale restaurant he'd chosen. He was the perfect gentleman. Pulled out my chair, ordered excellent wine, and regaled me with stories about his travels and business ventures. But as the evening progressed, I could see he was working up to something. "Sarah," he said over dessert, "I have to ask you something. Are you really just friends with Jake?" This was it. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. That's an interesting question, I said, taking a sip of my wine. What makes you ask? Harrison leaned forward slightly. I've been watching Jake at work for 3 years. He's never brought anyone to company events before. Tonight was the first time, and the way he looked at you. That wasn't how someone looks at a friend. I smiled, feeling the power shift in my favor. You're very observant, Mr. Harrison. Please call me David. And yes, I didn't get to where I am by missing important details. So I'll ask again. Are you really just friends? I set down my wine glass and looked him directly in the eyes. Jake and I have been living together for 2 years. We've been in a committed relationship, talking about marriage, building a life together. But apparently, acknowledging that publicly would hurt his precious career image. David's expression changed from confusion to anger in seconds. He lied to me. He lied to everyone at the company. He did more than that. I continued. He made me invisible. He erased 2 years of our relationship because he was afraid it would make him look less professional or less available for advancement. He chose his image over his integrity. David sat back in his chair, processing this information. I've built my company on trust and honesty. If someone will lie about something as fundamental as their personal relationships, what else will they lie about? I hadn't expected him to take it quite this seriously, but I realized I'd underestimated how much David valued honesty in his employees. This was about more than just personal relationships. This was about character. I appreciate your honesty, Sarah, David said finally. And I think you should know that this conversation has been very enlightening about Jake's character. Monday morning came, and I knew the fallout was about to begin. Jake left for work with his usual confidence, completely unaware that his carefully constructed image was about to crumble. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The call came around 10 a.m. Jake's voice was shaking with rage and panic. What did you tell him? He demanded. Harrison called me into his office and asked me point blank if we're dating. He knows Sarah. He knows I lied. I told him the truth, I said simply. Something you seem to have forgotten how to do. You've ruined everything. Do you have any idea what this means for my career? I felt a cold satisfaction wash over me. I know exactly what it means. It means you're finally facing the consequences of your choices. The workplace fallout was swift and brutal. David didn't fire Jake. That would have been too dramatic. But he made it clear that Jake's dishonesty had damaged his reputation irreparably. Colleagues who had respected him began to see him as manipulative and untrustworthy. If he would lie about something as basic as having a girlfriend, what else was he lying about? Jake's carefully planned career trajectory came to a grinding halt. The promotion he'd been angling for went to someone else. The big accounts he'd been hoping to land were reassigned. His image as a rising star was replaced by whispers about his character and integrity. When he confronted me that evening, I was ready for him. You destroyed my career, he said, his voice cold with fury. No, I replied calmly. You destroyed your career the moment you decided I was something to be ashamed of. You made me invisible, so I made our relationship visible. I simply told the truth. You manipulated the situation. You used Harrison to get back at me. I used the situation you created. You introduced me as your friend, so I acted like your friend. Friends are allowed to date other people. Friends are allowed to have honest conversations about their lives. I watched as the reality of what he'd done finally sank in. He'd been so focused on protecting his image that he'd forgotten the most basic principle of building a successful career: integrity. You didn't have to destroy everything we built together, he said quietly. We didn't build anything together, I shot back. You built a career based on lies and deception. You built a relationship where you were ashamed of me. That's not love, Jake. That's not partnership. That's just using someone until they become inconvenient. The aftermath of that confrontation was surprisingly peaceful. Jake moved out within the week, and I found myself alone in our apartment, feeling lighter than I had in months. The weight of constantly trying to make myself smaller, less visible, less inconvenient had lifted, and I could finally breathe. Jake's career never fully recovered. The damage to his reputation was too severe. And in a field where relationships and trust are everything, he found himself increasingly isolated. Eventually, he left the company and started over somewhere else, hopefully having learned the lesson that integrity matters more than image. But the most interesting development was my friendship with David Harrison. Not romantic. We both knew that would be inappropriate given how we'd met, but a genuine friendship based on mutual respect and honesty. He became a mentor of sorts, someone who understood the importance of being proud of the people in your life. You know, David said to me over coffee a few months later, I learned something important from that whole situation. I realized I'd been surrounding myself with people who told me what they thought I wanted to hear, rather than what I needed to hear. Your honesty was refreshing. It was through David that I eventually met Marcus, a colleague of his from another firm. Marcus was everything Jake wasn't, confident enough to introduce me proudly, secure enough to include me in his world, and mature enough to understand that love isn't something you hide when it's inconvenient. The first time Marcus introduced me to his colleagues, he beamed with pride. This is Sarah, my girlfriend, he said, his arm around my waist. She's incredible at what she does, and I'm the luckiest man alive. I nearly cried right there in the middle of his office party. This was what it felt like to be cherished, to be shown off, to be someone's source of pride rather than shame. Looking back, I realized that Jake's betrayal was actually a gift. It showed me what I was willing to accept in a relationship, and what I absolutely wouldn't tolerate. It taught me that love without pride is just possession, and that someone who truly loves you will never make you feel invisible. The karma Jake experienced wasn't just about his damaged career. It was about missing out on a woman who would have supported him through anything if he just had the courage to be proud of her. He chose his image over his integrity, and in the end he lost both. Sometimes the people who claim to love us make us feel the smallest. But remember, you deserve someone who's proud to call you theirs. If this story resonated with you, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself. And remember, never let anyone make you invisible. What would you have done in Sarah's situation? Let me know in the comments below. Because at the end of the day, the right person will never make you question your worth. They'll never hide you like a secret or treat you like an inconvenience. They'll introduce you with pride, include you in their world, and make sure everyone knows how lucky they are to have you. And if someone can't do that, well, maybe it's time to let them experience what life looks like without you in it.